Welcome everybody to the memorial service for Rae Allen. We're all so happy that you came. We had some time to think about what we would say and things that we really cherish about Rae. And I just want to thank everyone for all the lovely emails and well wishes, and you've all been a wonderful part of her life. And I've been really fortunate as her niece to get to know many of you and spend time with you. So the way that we decided to do the memorial today is to first thank you. And Ellen Gear would have been here to introduce you. She's going to her grandson's graduation from high school. She's very excited about that. But the reason we chose the Botanicum, Theatricum Botanicum, is because this was the first theater I ever went to with Rae here in Topanga and California that was outdoors, and it was a wonderful experience for me. And she explained the whole story about the Will Gear Theater being developed because, it was the time of being an artist and communism and things like that. And so Will went ahead and did his own thing. And I think it's really appropriate in that way to have the memorial here because Rae was very much of a doer herself, really sort of having to strike out on her own and make things happen. So I have a couple of speakers lined up here, and I thought the first person I'd bring up would be Kyle Fritz. And Kyle is her manager, was her manager. And I'd love to hear what you have to say about Rae.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. I guess I don't need to introduce myself because you did that lovely. I'm sure Rae would just be thrilled that we're all here at the Botanicum celebrating her. I'm happy to be a part of it. I first met Rae in the late 80s. I was a theater major at Arizona State University, and I wanted desperately to learn more about film and television in Los Angeles. And somehow I stumbled onto a school called the Actor Center, owned by the late, great Sam Christensen. I don't know if you knew him. So I made arrangements and headed to Hollywood for summer break to explore film and television. It was there I would have the first pleasure of meeting Rae for the first time. I was enrolled in her acting for camera class. I distinctly remember the day I fell in love with Rae. We had to do a monologue on camera, which I'd never done before. And I chose a piece I'd been working on back at ASU from a play called Tracers. And I put this piece on tape and reviewed it as a class. Now, this is why I remember it. At that time in my life, I was looking for any real validation in Hollywood, like every other aspiring actor, and from anyone really, and Rae was about to be the first. We watched my tape, and Rae, with that mischievous twinkle in her eyes, had only one thing to say. "See you in the movies, kid." Well, I was over the moon. I was excited. It wasn't the first time she'd be wrong. But boy, she sure gave me the courage to leave school, pack my bags, and permanently move to Hollywood. It's funny, you never know who's going to come into your life and make a huge impact. And in that moment, Rae did. Unbeknownst to me, it wouldn't be the last time I would have a chance meeting with Rae Allen, and that our journey would even be more impactful on one another. So I didn't run into her again until a few years later. Once when I was running Margie Haber's acting studio, she just showed up there to teach. And then the other year later, when I went to run Howard Fine's studio, in Roxbury, of course, who started teaching there, it seemed Rae had her fingers in dozens of different pies all the time. I recall one week in particular, I'd been restructuring the studio. This was before email was a thing. And I'd installed these boxes to leave information and stuff for the faculty and class lists. And Rae walked into my office, and at this time, I think she would be about in her 60s. And she explained to me she's leaving for a few weeks to Germany to teach some classes. And also, rumor had it, she had a younger gentleman there, big surprise. I said to Rae, no problem, have a good time. Just make sure to check your box when you get back. Well, without missing a beat, with that same mischievous twinkle, I think I'd come to a door. You all know what I'm talking about, right? She said, "Darling, I assure you my box will be full." To which I turned about 30 shades of red. And we fell out laughing. Rae couldn't have been more delighted. One, she made me laugh. Always an actress looking to make you laugh. 2, she made me blush, which isn't easy to do. And lastly, I think it was her way of telling me she was still very much alive and active. And it was at that moment I realized that this was really an incredible, formidable woman who had no immediate plans of slowing down now or ever. So a few years later, I became a talent manager, and out of the blue, I get a call from Rae. "Darling, it's Rae Allen. I hear you're managing actors now." "Yes," I said. "Well, how would you like to have me on your roster, kid?" I said an unequivocal yes, and that would become a 20-year business partnership. Yeah, we had really a lot of fun. She worked quite often. I enjoyed helping her along. One of my fondest memories and one of her favorite TV gigs was playing Quintina Blundetto on The Sopranos. I'd gotten an appointment for this great recurring part, right? And for those who may not know, The Sopranos used to shoot in New York. And it was one of the first shows that actually started putting actors on tape, LA actors on tape. And what we now call doing self-tapes. But back then, now all actors do is have to self-tape. But back then, this was really kind of a rare thing. So that meant you had to get out your clunky video camera, tape on VHS, FedEx the tape to the casting director, which we did. However, I got a call from the casting director, Sheila Jaffe, at the time, and she wanted to give Rae some notes. Ugh. So that meant retaking, sending all over again. I called Rae and I told her. And I said, "Look, we need to retape it with Sheila's notes." Of course, Rae wasn't happy. She had given yet another brilliant performance and didn't know what she'd do differently. "Too broad," she said. "Don't they know I won the Tony?" Yeah, true. Next thing I know, I was getting a call from my now dear friend, April Webster. She said, "Hi, Kyle, it's April Webster. I talked to Rae. I know what they're looking for on The Sopranos, and I know how to help Rae get the right performance." So, over to the living room in my then condo, show up Rae, April, and this huge camcorder. April directed it. Rae got the part, and the rest is history. Yeah. I just remember thinking this remarkable woman had a friendship with this prominent casting director who was willing to drive all the way across town to put her on tape. I mean, how does she do this? And what an amazing friendship they had. We should all be so lucky to have an April in our lives.
Yes. Yeah.
So as years went on and auditions became more scarce, Rae would call probably every other week. "Hey kid, it's Rae. Am I retired yet?" It was her way of letting me know she wanted some action. We'd always catch up, have a few laughs. She'd end every call with a "bye, bye, bye, bye." And off I'd go to get her the next gig. This week, 19 years later, April returned to my home. It was a really full circle moment, this time with a ring light and microphones and cords, anything we might need to put together a celebration for dear Rae. We shared stories and laughs and memories and photos. It felt as if Rae was right in the room with us. I could almost see that famous mischievous smile. I know she'd have been pleased to see us gathering here talking all things Rae, being what she loved most, the center of attention, right? Yep. And enjoyed a friendship that she had inspired. Thank you, Rae, for the journey, the memories and the laughs. I'm forever grateful you blew into my life like a hurricane and stayed along for the ride. I miss you and I love you. Bye, 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 kid.
Well, thanks, Kyle.
Sorry. Whoa. I'm fine. Whoa! Sorry. I got a little verklempt. Sorry. I just want to make sure that the camera's on.
Okay. Thanks for that, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle.
That was lovely.
That was beautiful. Thank you. No, I'm fine. I just got
The sun is going down, so it's a little bit difficult to read, but hopefully we'll get through it. But next up is Phil Littell.
Those stairs are very dangerous. Hi. I'm first going to read something Maya Danziger sent. She wished she could be here, and she sent me this absolutely lovely piece that kind of tells my story too, so I can skip a lot. This is Maya speaking. I first met Rae when I was a teenager in New York in the early 60s. Her then husband, Herbie Harris, was a Broadway musical colleague of my father's, and she and Herbie lived around the corner from us on the Upper West Side. Those were the years of free-spirited wild parties, and Herbie and Ray came often to our house, where they gathered round the 9-foot grand piano to make music. Herbie with one drum or another, Ray singing at the top of her voice with that unmistakably ballsy bravado. I was enchanted and a little frightened by her. I wanted to be an actress, but I had none of her self-confidence. When I was 16, I decided to apply to theater schools to see if I might have a chance of achieving my dream. I applied to Yale and NYU with Hunter College as a backup. A major in classics was my thought. Rae was teaching at NYU in those days, and since she lived around the corner, she offered to drive me downtown for my audition. On the way, she informed me that though she would be in the room for the audition, she was recusing herself from voting since she was a family friend. I was terrified to audition in front of her. Why is it always harder with someone who knows you? But assured her that I understood. I was desperate to prove that I was as tough as she was. I entered the audition room, did my 2 monologues, Juliet, and the Kala Lilies Are in Bloom Again speech from stage door. Then, even though I wasn't applying for musical theater, they asked me to sing. I froze. I don't sing. I had no song prepared. Rae, from the back of the room, started humming, "I'd do anything for you," from Oliver, which she knew I knew because I'd seen every musical on Broadway. I stumbled through the song and left the room mortified. I waited for the rest of the auditions to be over, listening to the sound of others singing brilliantly through the closed door. Rae finally emerged, and we headed to the car for the drive home. She didn't make eye contact, and she didn't say a word. We drove up the FDR in total silence. I was trying hard not to cry, but I was determined to show her that I was strong. We exited at 96th Street, and Rae pulled the car over and parked. She looked at me for the first time. "Are you sure you want to be an actress?" she asked. I nodded my head, tears welling. "Is there any way I can talk you out of this?" My heart sank, but I managed a brave no. She sighed deeply, then smiled. "Okay," she continued, "I needed to try. It's a terrible business. They accepted you unanimously. You're in." Then I really did burst into tears. I think I saw her smile a little as she pulled back onto the street for the ride home. I studied with Rae privately for years after NYU, where she taught me to act from my vagina, and can confidently say that her brand of moxie and tough love served me brilliantly for my 38 years in show business. She was one of a kind, and though I lost touch with her as time went on, she will always have an indelible place in my heart. Rest in peace, dear Rae. That's mine. I thought I scribbled my notes on the back of another piece of paper. Okay, so good. The piece of paper lies on the table in my apartment. And so basically what I want to say is I first saw Rae when Melanie Maron called me up and said, "Look, we've been studying with this amazing woman, and she's in rehearsals for this big Broadway musical, and she said we could come and watch." And I said, "Yeah, I heard about this Rae Allen." And so away we went, and this was Dude, one of the most epic flops in Broadway history. They had taken the Broadway theater, gutted it, filled it with dirt, then filled it with rubber chips because the dirt made Rae dust, and when wet, turned to mud. There was an incredible cast: William Redfield, Michael Dunn, Nell Carter, and there were ramps everywhere. And so I walked into the scene where there were all these kids running around on ramps. There was William Redfield and Michael Dunn sitting exhausted on the sides. And this woman was in the middle of the stage, and the monologue was basically the word me. Me. And her voice went everywhere. her energy went everywhere. And I literally saw her pulling energy and centeredness through her fingers out of the air. And I went, oh, she's got everything I don't have. I've got to get it. And so I wormed my way in. And she taught me so much just by sitting next to her. I had the brains to be her assistant. And I assisted her when she taught. I assisted her sometimes casting. And another point I just want to make before I go. One of my favorite castings was when she was casting Megan Terry's Hot House. And she brought in every wonderful actress of her age, of her generation, one by one, these amazing people, Skipper Damon, all these people. And I realized that she really admired her cohorts, that she believed in other actresses, that her friendships were with actresses, some of them great lifelong friendship, Georgia Brown. And then I saw the men come in, and they were candy. And, all I can say is that I still use the word actress because that signifies something that's more interesting than an actor. So, thank you.
Before I begin, I was just looking at this picture and I noticed this.
Oh, wow.
You never know what kind of influence people you love are going to have over you. And I just can't stop looking at that picture of Rae and her eyes. It really gets me. Anyway. Rae was also known to me as Bigfoot. Because I wore a size 10 and she wore a size 11. And whenever I needed a quick shoe for any kind of occasion, or something unexpected, her shoes were always there for me. And needless to say, they were very hard shoes to fill. I had to fly to New York unexpectedly. Rae's winter boots were there for me, and her generosity certainly went beyond boots. There were winter coats and hats and scarves and gloves, and we just really both loved clothes very much. And the New Year's sale at CP Shades was a national holiday for us. What did you get? How many? Do you think they have any left? Can I go? You want to come with me? Okay. Oh, no, there's no more CP Shades there either. But anyway, I really don't remember how actually I met Rae. It might have been at this organization that we both joined, but somewhat reluctantly, but it was necessary. And in time, she came to know my husband and my children and my whole family, and we all became friends. And she really was a charmer. And one winter, when we were both in New York, she invited me and my son, David, to the wrap party for The Sopranos. And David got to play pool with James Gandolfini. And of course, my son David lost, but he never forgot that. It was just the greatest thing ever. And that's the kind of thing she did all the time, it was some kind of fabulous surprise. And, she was also always, I can't say I couldn't figure it out. She was always surrounded by the young and the handsome. There were her great friends Hans from Germany, and who, when he was needed, he was always by her side. And there was, great, his name just went right out of my... Gustavo, thank you, Gustavo. He was a gorgeous guy, too. And then there were all those lucky young actors who had the privilege of being directed by Rae in Cyrano at the Ruskin. And that brilliant rendition, I sat through it and I saw it with her, and she was so proud of it. And I think that's one of the places where her outstanding direction really took wing, and it was a terrific production. And anyway, I went to her lovely dinner parties and helped her arrange her furniture, and but most of all for me, and Rae was like this living history She knew everybody who was anybody in the theater during her time period. And sometimes her opinions coincide with my own, and sometimes they didn't, but she really knew them all. I just knew them cursorily, or whatever that word is. And I don't know if you know Bobby Lewis, but I would say, what do you think of Bobby Lewis? And she'd say, oh, funny little man. And Stella Adler, she said, don't get me started on Stella. And then there was Mildred Dunnock, and she said to me, I remember this, she said, never, never, Carol, upstage Millie, because she may be slight, but she's a real tiger. And just the list went on. And I don't know if she ever slept with Marlon Brando. Do you? No, she didn't. But she did. Okay, well, I don't know if she did either. But I do remember that when in the very last stages of her life, she had probably the very best room, or at least what I thought was the best room, in the motion picture home. And I asked her, I said, how did you get such a great room? She had a beautiful terrace, and it was a big room, and it was right near the nurse's station. She said, well, I slept with the doctor. And I believe somewhere in the mist, Rae did. And I just was really proud to be her friend. And I loved her voice, and I loved her big, beautiful face. And I loved her opinions and her deep understanding of all things theatrical. And I loved her description of her beloved Italy and the food. Oh, the food. And the way she was always there for her friends who needed her. You could count on Rae. Rae took her encyclopedic, or whatever, I stumbled on that word, but a knowledge of theater with her. And I just wish, I really do wish that she could have written something, that she could have written it down or written a book. And I wish that she was here to declare a production or a performance of some person as being delicious. She always used that word, delicious. And she loved to work. Oh boy, did she love to work. And she never stopped planning and thinking. And I just kind of imagine that that's what she's doing right now. Yep, and she's telling the angels, stand over there, sit over there, do this. Maybe you better think about that a little more. You know, insisting that they free themselves and fly, soaring, just as she did, her big feet and all. So, thanks, Rafi. I guess I'll see you soon, but I hope not too soon. So, thank you. Oh, thank you.
Well, I think we have a theme. Young men.
Yes, thank you.
As a starter. I'm reading something from her friend Robert Lear, and then I'll say a few words myself. Okay, this is from Robert. I still can't believe that my irrepressible, irresistible friend Rae has left me. She was one of the life force personalities who aren't supposed to die. I met Rae in the late 70s when we were both managing Lort Theaters. Rae bringing her new life and professional quality to Springfield West in Massachusetts as artistic director, and I managing Michael Lesak's Colonnade Theater Lab in New York. We became instant friends, bonded by our mutual friend and wild and wonderful Edith Markson, who introduced American and then Soviet theater directors to each other's work, and who went off with Rae on spiritual sprees to Hindu ashrams. This Jewish maven from the American South and this feisty Catholic girl from Italo-American New York City. I followed her stage work long before Damn Yankees and Miss Reardon Drinks a Little, before it could be called a career, when she was one of Mr. Abbott's, George Abbott's, chorus girls in Pajama Game, an off-Broadway, then on-scene Steeler and O'Casey's Knock at the Door, with a great actress whom she adored, Eileen McMahon. And as a young character actress in the ensemble at the American Shakespeare Festival in Stamford, Connecticut, where she was once pulled aside by Miss Hepburn and reminded that she was only in the ensemble. Rae Allen had a way of being noticed. We reunited in LA in the late 80s through the LATC, and again in the mid-90s in Europe, when Rae was teaching in London and Milan and coaching on film sets in Spain. We hung out at the Groucho Club where she stayed in London, met up in Bologna, feasted on Italian eating, and cavorted in Paris, where I was living at the time. One New Year's Eve in Paris, she brought her 30-something boy toy German student on his way to matinee idoldom, and they slow danced the night away in the Marais, in my little Marais garret. Forever the Bohemian, always living fiercely and fearlessly, acting, directing, writing, loving, and above all, living. Rae still sits on my shoulder telling me how it should be done, and I am wild about her. That was his. I was one of Rae's students when she was teaching a breakthrough workshops in LA. I had no money, so she gave me a scholarship to be her stage manager. So I got to see a lot of the behind the scenes and the front of the scenes. And my biggest takeaway about Rae was that no matter like the level of talent that these young actors had, or how advanced they were in their craft, when we got to the end of the workshop and were on tape doing our work, she always found at least one thing to focus on that was beautiful about that person, that she saw, that she thought they could just bring that to their work. And it was lovely to see someone who was an actor be that generous. I've had lots of acting teachers that were former actors, and that's not usually the brand. And if you were really lucky and you were really on your work, she'd give you that world-famous chef's kiss. And coming from an Italian woman, that was a lot. I also learned something really valuable, is that as funny as we talk about her, bigger than life personality, her confidence in her work, you might say actor's ego, she also had this great sense of humor about her accomplishments. Kyle's my husband, and I got to spend a lot of time with Rae, and one time we'd driven out to the West Side to go to dinner with Rae and drove her back to her apartment, and she invited us up for a drink, and I went to put my drink down on a coaster that looked an awful lot like a Tony Award. Oh my God. And I all but shrieked and said, "Rae, is that your Tony?" And she said, "Oh, darling, yes, I fell off the pedestal by meaning it to get it fixed. But at least it's useful, isn't it?" Great takeaway. Mwah.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you. I'm going to be reading. I'm Lisa Ann.
Lisa, let's pull my phone a little bit. There you go.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Is that better? So, I'm Lisa Ann Gold, and I've known Rae. I guess I've known Rae for almost 30 years. And I met her because of someone who introduced me to her, a guy named Bill Black. And can't find him. I had no idea how to find him. But he introduced me to her, and then I started being her assistant in a lot of different ways because I like to be a Jacqueline of all trades. I'm not really a born actor, but I am a born dancer, and I did learn to figure out how to dance and talk at the same time. When you mentioned, where'd you go? When you mentioned Mr. Abbott, my favorite thing that she said about Mr. Abbott was she was his screamer. He would always have her scream off stage. If they needed a scream, it was her. Anyway, and then I also want to just mention that Rich Grosso, who couldn't be here, he's really sorry that he couldn't be here, but he knows that she would be happy because he's working right now, and that's why he can't be here. I've also been, I also chose to read, and if I get her name wrong, you can correct me, Jane Decknatel, who Rae worked with, and I think they traveled to Australia and did the breakthrough workshops.
That's actually how the breakthrough workshops started.
Happened, yeah. So, do you remember the time we were in a play for weeks, when you were in a play for weeks and weeks at the Taper? I think you were playing a witch, and every night you brought her home with you. Those were the months you lived on my pink sofa because of a broken leg. The director wanted you to continue with the broken leg and all, and your first call was one of help. My daughters still tell stories of how you channeled spirits from the pink sofa before they left for school in the morning. We laughed and we drank champagne, at least I did, and talked through the night about Australia and the adventures we had had. You taught so many Australian actors and directors, made them fierce, taught them how to speak to their souls, while insisting that I spend the weekend in one of your workshops upon my return to Los Angeles. Sit in the back row and only speak when spoken to, you said firmly. And of course, I obeyed. I learned that when I was truly present in the back of the room, heart first, silent, never being the first to volunteer, especially for the hard stuff, I had the same life experience as when talking up the room at the front. By the end of the first day, everyone in the workshop had found a quiet moment to come and talk to me, share their secret desires as well as their fears, while knowing nothing about me at all. I have never forgotten that lesson. Thank you. Your last act of our Australian adventure was you sent me to a psychic as a birthday gift. She, the psychic, would not allow me up her front gate unless I left all of my clothes there. You're almost dead, she said from her doorway as I walked naked through the garden to her crystal-filled space. You came just in time. Dearest Rae, you changed my life, transformed my life, made me laugh, and introduced me to April, who became family. And to this day, we give thanks, for we would never have met if it hadn't been for you. So much to thank you for, wherever you are, creating joy, playing with the angels, and probably teaching them something new. Remember how much we love you and owe you, with so much love and laughter, Jane. And that's kind of how I feel. When I read this, I just realized this is one of the things I could read. And I just want to thank everybody for coming. You know, Rae loved all of you in her way. And I love you for being here too.
I think it's okay, yes. I'm Gloria Vando Hickok, and I've known Rae since the 50s. Her husband, Herbie Harris, was a, what did they call him? Oh gosh, now I can't remember. Anyway, he was a drummer, but he also got musicians for my husband at the time. And that's how we met, Rae and I. Let me see. Yes. When Maurice began conducting, Rae performed, Maurice Paris was my husband and my children's father. And Rae performed with him, most notably playing the role of the old lady in Leonard Bernstein's Candide. Her aria, I Am Easily Assimilated, brought the house down as Rae sang and rang tangoed. She sang and tangoed her way across the stage. She was hilarious. Sheer joy, energy, and hilarity. She had an incredible career, acting and singing on Broadway, in films, on television, directing plays all over the country, teaching, coaching, you name it, she did it. And she did it as best as it could be done. One of the plays she directed in LA was Cyrano, and that was mentioned before. But I went on opening night and sat next to Rae. A terrible mistake. Never sit next to the director on opening night. It's unhealthy. Despite this, the audience and I loved the show and the acting. I think it was John Colella. He was wonderful. And the theater was delightful, and the whole sets, everything about it was just such a delight. On a personal note, Rae was one of the most inclusive persons I've known. When my husband, Bill, my late husband, was ill, when we moved to LA, she opened her door for her and her heart for us. During this time, Rae's apartment was always full of friends and colleagues who adored her, and she adored them. and always at her side were two of the best pals one could wish for, April and Lisa. They were always there, and they were just wonderful. May we all be blessed with such loving friends and family. What would we do without Betty? Rae was always incredibly attentive, first with my 3 children when they were young. I wasn't going to tell the story, but I think I shall. When Annika was about 3.5 years old, we went to the Russian tea room, and Annika was standing on the bench. You know, she couldn't sit down. She was jumping up and down, and Rae looked at her and said, "If you don't sit down, I'm going to take you into the kitchen and put you in a pot of boiling water and serve you." And fortunately, Annika, who's sitting here, looked at her and said, "No, you're not." And so,
I think I was 5.
you were 5. No, you were little thing. Cute. Oh, and yes, and they were later when my daughter Larka was studying acting. She went up to Massachusetts with Rae and stayed with her, and she said she almost froze to death. It was so cold, and there was no heat. Much later, when Bill became ill, she would come to the hospital or the rehab to see him and to rescue me. She would take me to new and exciting places to eat before I'd return to his bedside. A much-needed respite. I shall be forever grateful for that. I mean, she was really terrific. She was there for me every bit of the way, and the only friend to do that. I am disappointed that because of COVID, I was not able to spend time with her these past few years. Thanks to April, Annika and I managed to visit her the last day of her life to say goodbye. Annika played her the songs she sang in Candide, and we could see a bit of a smile as she listened. I am so lucky to have had such a precious and lasting friendship with such an incredible person. Thank you, sweetheart. Aww.
Tango across the table. Was it me? Yeah, I'm not
Yeah, you are.
Introduce yourself. I'll introduce myself.
We all know you.
Hi, I'm April. I'm April Webster, and I couldn't bring myself to write anything down. I'd been avoiding it. I guess it was sort of like, I mean, this is the first time I've really been able to cry about Rae, and just hearing everyone's stories, and how many people I met through her, like you guys, and became really good friends, Philip and Daryl and Craig and you guys, and now I'm just through other means. I mean, really, if it wasn't for Kyle and Jonathan, we wouldn't have been able to get Rae into the motion picture home like we did, and just all of you. I've met so many wonderful people, and your family. I didn't realize how much I'd actually gotten from Rae. We used to have breakfast every single weekend because I was working. Oftentimes during the week we would go to dinner too, and we would talk about everything. In fact, that was from an Eileen Fisher sale. That's and it looked so great on her. I said, I'm buying you that sweater. But I mean, the wonderful thing about Rae is that she really was there for you. She made it possible for me to have the confidence to do what I do. I teach, and I teach in Europe. I teach all over, and what I teach is what I realize what she taught me, which is just to know what your gifts are, and to focus on that as opposed to what you don't have, because that's really where your goal is, right? Sorry. We block so much, and when you have someone, one of the things that was a main focus of that class was being acknowledged. And so many of us have missed that in our lives, for someone to say, or delicious, I use that expression all the time. I didn't realize that I got it from Rae. I'm sure I did. In fact, there was even one time I had been casting a movie, and it was all Native American actors, and I had been reading with everyone, and there was a part of a social worker, and they wanted a Caucasian woman, and I had been reading with everybody. So the director, the line producer, calls me up, John Melfi, and he says, "April, the schedule changed again." I went, "Oh, great." I was already on another project. "Yeah, okay, what do we need now?" "Well, we don't have Mrs. Anderson yet." I said, "The social worker? Well, can't you get it out of San Francisco?" "No, Dan wants you to play it." Me, I'm not an actor. So, short, long story short, I ended up playing one of the only Caucasian people I had, and I was thinking I was going to be this very cool social worker. I was going to have like big hoop earrings, and my hair was very curly and strawberry blonde at the time, and Rae was my coach, which she reminded everybody about. So that I coached her on that. So, I'd had no idea. I hadn't been in front of a camera for since I was living in the Village in New York. And it was her working with me on it that, showed me how to slow it down. The director had a completely different idea than I did. I ended up with a bun and a string of pearls, blue eyeshadow, and a very ill-fitting black suit. And he said, because I was going to be very empathetic, and he said, no, he whispered in my ear, "This is the 11th house you've been in. You can't wait to get home and just take your shoes off and have a glass of wine." I went, "Oh, okay." Rae had given me the flexibility in that to be able to make the shift. Oftentimes we have a lot of friends, but they don't always sort of stay in touch. And when I wasn't feeling well, whether it was an emotional not well or a physical not well, Rae always checked on me to see what was going on. And not everybody does that. I have very good friends who, even after I was mugged, never called to say, "How are you doing?" But Rae was always there. And I'm not saying, as things, progressed, sometimes there were some difficulties, but ultimately, we were really like best friends. I mean, more than that, we were family. We would walk around and people would say, "Oh, is this your sister?" And it would make me so mad because she was so much older than me. I would say, "No." "Oh, it's your aunt?" "Yes, it's my aunt." But I think it was because being with her, I was able to sort of access my own strength and my own focus and that energy that she had. I can't tell you how many things I learned from Daryl and Philip in the workshop through the work that we had done. I remember Daryl saying to me, be as big as you can be, because I was always trying to diminish myself. And so it was through that work that I have a successful life. I'm not even talking about just career. It's about being able to impart that information to other actors and other artists to let them know your gifts, And Rafi, you gave me a great gift. So, thank you.
Well, I'm going to be the last speaker, but we do have extra time, so if people do feel like they want to share, we can certainly do that as well.
Can I say something?
Yes, I would love for you. Would you like to come up now?
Raise that mic up for him. Put that mic up a little higher.
Yeah, we have a tall gentleman here.
No, I want you to. Yes, please. And please introduce yourself for the people who are live streaming.
Hello, I'm Daryl Keith Roach. I met Rae. You all inspired me to say something. I was a little embarrassed of coming up here with this condition I have right now. So forgive me. I met Rae in 1979. And
I'm not much taller, but
in 1979, and I was in a workshop called Impact. And it was an early morning transformational workshop for actors and entrepreneurs. And I was studying acting, and at the time in the late 70s, there weren't very many roles for black actors, or they didn't know how to fit us in, and there were a lot of excuses about he's too dark or too tall or too not black enough or too black, or all this stuff we went through. So I walked into Rae. I saw, actually, I think it was in the early 80s, I saw a production she did at USC called Candide, and it was the first time I understood Candide. I saw it on Broadway. I'm from New York City, and I just went, wow. And so I went to her class. We had to do monologues, and the first monologue I brought in, since there wasn't much material for black actors at the time, I brought in, when I was a kid, my parents would teach us not Goldilocks and the Three Bears or Little Red Riding Hood. We read black stories and of Langston Hughes' simple stories.
Yes.
And so when Rae heard it, she said, I don't know that. And I said, well, it's Langston Hughes' Jessie B. Simple stories. And she said, bring more of them in. So I began to bring them in. The first one was Temptation, which was, it started with, when the Lord said, let there be light, and there was light. I want to know where us colored peoples were. We must not have been there because we're still dark. So either he did not include us or we weren't there. And Rae thought, bring more of that in. And then she gave me the idea of doing a one-man show that she directed. I had my father write the music. My father was, at the time, Max Roach, and she knew who Max Roach was because of Herbie, and we commiserated on how difficult it was to grow up with a drummer or live with a drummer. So she taught me so much. She taught me how to, like when we were doing rehearsing for Simple, I would cook for her every single day. And she would say things like, okay, what did you bring for lunch today? I said, roasted chicken. And then after each thing, she said, oh, you're brilliant, darling, and then eat. And I was so, at the time suspicious. Everything I did, I couldn't be brilliant about, was my thought. But she said, you're brilliant, darling. And then when the play opened, I was telling Craig today, so I was reading the Hollywood Reporter, and there was an article that said Roach brilliant. And I had seen it so much about my father, I thought the article was about my father, and I glanced over it. And I remember calling Rae up and I said, did you pay the Hollywood Reporter for this review? And she said, no, darling, you're brilliant. And I just, I loved her so much. And I worked with her in Australia, as April said, and through all the workshops. And she just opened my world to be not just a young black kid, but as a human being who happened to be black, who happened to be gay, who happened to be tall, who happened to be all the things that I could include myself. And so I remember so much about her gifts of giving people the sense of being large and being who they are. So, and she loved lighting, and I thought, this is a great lighting. So thank you.
It's your turn, Betty.
Okay. Well, thanks, Max. Really, really appreciate that.
Daryl.
Sorry. Thanks, Daryl. I just wanted to end with a couple of thank yous before I talk about Rae. I'm Betty Cosgrove, Rae's niece. So there were some generous donations that were made on behalf of the invitation we mentioned for people to give to Motion Picture Home. And I want to thank Ari Gross and Julia McAmain and Lorca Perez and Samantha Macy and Daryl. And I know other people, April, give throughout the year, but it was a wonderful place for Rae to be for the last 8 years of her life, and an amazing place that she was able to go to because she's a diva. And they know exactly how to handle people who've been in the business. She made the best of friends with Connie McClam, one of the nurses there. And Connie holds Rae's picture by her side on her desk to this day. Very special person to Connie, and Connie was brilliant with her. A special thanks to a lot of the staff at the Motion Picture Television Fund. Susie Hasburn, she would Zoom me or Facebook me with Rae at a moment's notice when Rae was having a great day. Darlene Salas, who helped us through the last days with Rae. Very, very difficult choices to make about, end of days care, and was very patient with us. Tiffany Lawrence, who always managed to get a big tent on her porch right outside her room, her apartment. And we had, music and food and parties on that porch, even though it was, supposed to be a quiet respite type of place, right? And Dr. Humayun. And then also many of the other staff that I haven't mentioned. Richard, who she called Fluffy, which I'll never get the story on. That's what she called him. So I want to thank all those people. And then for today, for Kathleen, with your help for setting up the memorial so much, and Lisa and April as well. Absolutely. So I have some bookmarks out front, and I want you all to take one home. One of the reasons I put the saying on the back was I was watching Madeleine Albright's memorial service, and it was stunning to me because her children went at the end. And after all these brilliant things that Madeleine's done, her children really focused on the everyday nature of the things that their mother did for them, not, the brilliant things you did. And this sort of brings my story with Rae down home to this point, which is by the time I realized who Rae was, she had already done 10 Broadway productions. I mean, she had those under her belt, and I didn't even know about this aunt that was on Broadway, and I was living in New York. But the quote on the back of the bookmark is, be the author of your own story. And that certainly is what Rae did. She was a force of nature, and people have said that over and over again. And I know this now, that she was directing local theater to the very end, that she developed breakthrough in film and traveled to England and Germany and Italy and did those breakthrough in film coachings. And so to me, she was just the cool aunt. We would have holiday, we would have Easter, we would have Christmas, and Rae would come in on a rental car or sometimes on the train. And she would be the cool aunt who had the nice gifts every, so often we'd get to see her. She would give special gifts that I'd never seen anything like that before, beautiful wrapping. And then all of a sudden, I realized after her Tony, and I wasn't even cognizant during her Tony, after her Tony, somewhere around Hot House, and my parents were out of town, they were actually working in another country, that I was going to go see Rae on Broadway. And I was going to go see something that she was working on. Well, it never panned out. So instead, she came back to our house in the suburbs. And what she did was describe the household to me years later, which is the parents weren't home and there were 4 young girls. And it was the 70s. She said, the house looks like it's levitating. Basically we were getting high and we were doing things, and she thought that was just crazy. But she was the aunt who actually ended up grounding me. She grounded me in how she developed her friendships as her new family. I mean, I don't think it's hard to describe, but she grew up in a family of vaudevillians and people who sang and people who painted, but they never really supported this idea of being an actor on the stage. And so she did that route by herself, really largely, and she nurtured all of her friendships and all of her relationships to make that happen for her. So it was really a great kind of example to me. she introduced me to all her friends like they would become my family too. So April and Lisa, and Dee, Dolores, who knits those incredible sweaters, and Carol, who writes about her hippie woman wild story, and Samantha, who who actually was married to Bill, and who worked on a story that she wrote, Naked in Calcutta, where she talked about the revival of Mrs. Reardon Drinks a Little. And these are all indicators of what I'd missed. You know, these were stories that she shared with me through her friends. And Richard, who does hair in New York City, and Bobby Lear, who you described, Johnny, who's actually had a varied career in the arts and as a producer, and he really is still working, doing period costumes with dinners in historic sites across the world. You know, so really the type of people that she introduced me to were people I would never have normally met. And I can't say enough about how Lisa and April really managed the last decade of Rae's life, because it wasn't an easy time, you know. Before, you know, I would come to visit every 3 or 4 times a year, and then sometimes Rae would come back to New York City, and we would go to Canal Street to get her Chanel bag, her knockoff. And I really had no idea what she was talking about, because that wasn't something I personally really ever did. So I said, okay, sure, we'll go. And we ended up not just going where you see people with blankets on the sidewalk and all the bags hanging out. No. We're going into the alley, a left and then a right and then a left. And I'm looking over my shoulder, worried, like, how deep are we going into this? And sure enough, she finds the best bags that are available. And it's like she knows the people by name practically and was able to buy what she needed. But she always, justified this by, in this business, you have to look a certain way. But I think she really just liked the hunt, for her. But these last couple of years, as April expressed, Rae, I think it was a monumental task. And I was just telling Lisa, April and Lisa literally took 2 years out of their life to wind up things. Whether it was the paperwork, the bills, the things that needed to be put in storage, finding her a wonderful place to stay, and then visiting her, and many of you have. And that's just the true tale of how I want it to be for myself. And it's a reminder that having friends like that, it's the world, it seems as though there was nothing you wouldn't do for her. And I think it's also a reflection when I hear April tell those stories about how Rae did that for other people. And so, the love you give, the love you make, is the love you get back. And, there were many, many Raeisms that people shared with me in emails, and I wouldn't be retelling them here, but whether it was just a description of how her hands and then a little flick of her fingers, and you kind of described that energy that goes off of her. I mean, I thought I was the only one who sort of noticed that, But it's funny because that is definitely a universal experience, that energy that she has and that she's able to give out. I just felt like it was a treasure. And I never really understood why I didn't get to know my aunt early on. But what I did get to know is the person who was very modest about her success, although she did like to hold court, and she did like to be the center of attention. But she did show me how she loved people and remembered them, and her history was amazing when it came to theater. And I think there were small things that I would do. I would do a reading for a memorial service, or, oh, darling, I could have helped you with that, And just little things that I laugh at now because I still had sort of forgotten that she has that capability. She has that, and because to me, she's my aunt. To me, she's the person who invited me into her life and let me know all of her friends. So I think before we thank everybody, And before we close up, we do have, I thought we were going to do a recording of, we're going to do that? Okay.
But we could do just the audio. It's your preference.
We do have the ability to play Rae's acceptance speech.
Can we remove that from
The picture?
no, the long thing?
Oh, you mean the tripod?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you still want to live stream, but
It didn't work.
It didn't work?
My sister couldn't.
more than anything, I want to thank everybody for coming today and being a part of her life.
Well, thank you for having us.